got three and I've got one at home.
Well, you're the only one that's not on the foundation.
Right. It's like we were talking about in the meeting, it's like people that come are probably the people that already know this.
Alright,
Yeah.
that's okay. I don't know it, so I'm here and you can educate me.
Excellent.
on it. And we are recording for at home. So, welcome to Third Sunday Forum. Okay, hi, please come in and join us. Welcome to Third Sunday Forum today. If you brought your coffee down and are finished with it after the forum, feel free to leave the mug on the water. Oh, if that's okay, you don't have to leave your own item, but if it's a church mug, you can leave it back on the rolly trolley back there by the door. Sure.
Sure.
Wherever you want, I'll just put my first down. Pick this one, and this one, how about there? Okay, I'll be right back.
Good morning, welcome. Are you looking for a Third Sunday Forum?
Can you grab a table?
I don't see why not.
Sure, hold on just a moment. Yep, if you want to grab one of those, that's fine.
Better bring it back up. How about you?
They're just, I saw them maybe. Right.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You okay with you?
See, the cups is impressive.
All right.
And then if you have questions during or.
No, it's. No, it's horrible.
I think maybe after.
Okay,
So we have.
Are you guys gonna record this?
it is
Yes.
recorded right now. I got recording on.
That makes sense.
Good morning. Nice to see all the sweaters this morning.
So. Had tangerines with everybody.
Sure, yeah, sounds good. So say, I think you're kind of on the show here, but.
I just, I know, we don't really agree with that. Oh, where did you?
Sure.
Yep, yep.
And they say, places, they'll be back.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get it all in.
20 slide there.
Yeah, sure. I'll let
Good
you.
morning, everybody.
Let me know otherwise.
Got a few more joining us online. I'll be watching the online chat if you have any questions. And, got 3 people joining us at home today. Welcome. We're just giving people a couple minutes to grab some coffee upstairs and then we'll get started.
I always like to start my presentations with some kind of humor. There was once a fella who always wanted to ride in a hot air balloon. And he went to the county fair and there in front of him was a hot air balloon. He was so excited, he ran to the hot air balloon. And as he didn't notice that as he was running, he tripped over the guy wire that was holding it down. He tumbled into the gondola. But he had released the rope that held it down and up it went into the air. He had no idea how to drive a hot air balloon. And it got into the jet streams and away it went and was off and off and off. And finally it started to come back down and there was a person down below him. And he said, "Where am I?" Guy on the ground said, "You're in a hot air balloon." The guy in the hot air balloon said, "You must be somebody's attorney. How'd you know? What you said is absolutely true and absolutely useless." And the guy on the ground then said, "You must be somebody's client. How'd you know? You don't know where you are or how you got here, and it's already my fault." When we talk about financial knowledge and personal finance, a lot of people are just now coming to the realization that they don't know where they are, what they are doing, or how much they have. Hopefully today's presentation will walk us through a little bit about financial literacy. I'm trying very hard not to use the term financial literacy. Because it has the connotation, if you're here for financial literacy education, that means you're financially illiterate. That's not true. You just are trying to acquire more knowledge and information. Well, as you can see on the screen, this quote from John Wesley, acquire all you can, gain all you can, save all you can, and give all you can, is a part of the presentation today, and it's something I'll try and touch on just a little bit as we go through. In a nutshell, if you can do this, then thank you very much, you've had a nice day. Live below your means and save the rest.
Yeah.
Why is that so hard? What is it that causes people to have a problem with that process? Well, now that we have people in the room, there are several of my friends who are here who are a part of this process. I have Mike over here, Mike Davis, who's on the worked through this with me on the foundation board.
You need to admit someone.
I did.
And Bob Highstand is here, Nick Miller is here. There are several people here who are kind enough to be a part of this presentation and talk with me through this. And one of the things that we will do is if there's enough interest, we could actually and would like to organize perhaps a weekly class for a 3 or 4 week session to get into the more detail that we can't get into as a part of a 40-minute presentation. So what gets in your way with regard to understanding your personal finances? And why does it matter? Well, there's, I forget the number of people in the United States that are considered to not be understand personal finance, but there are thousands of folks, the percentage is like 40% of adults don't understand personal finance. And what does that lead to for everyone? Stress, fear, lack of function. A little bit about myself. I put up my resume or curriculum vitae up there so you can see a little bit about my background. But stuff that more important perhaps is that I'm the 9th of 9 kids. My father passed away when I was in the 3rd grade. I was raised on public assist on Lyndon Johnson's Great Society public assistance benefits programs. Without them, I'd have never gotten to high school, let alone law school. I grew up in a family where credit cards were a sin, where credit was bad, where living paycheck to paycheck was what everybody did. In my career and my time, Mary and I have managed to save enough money to put ourselves well in the top level of assets in the nation. How do you go from someone who grew up on food stamps to someone who has the leisure to be able to give money to their church, other organizations, and have a comfortable home and start funding their children's retirement plans and all that kind of stuff? And the answer is delayed gratification. The first question seems like a simple one. What's your purpose for money? Think about that. Why, what do you do with money? It's a tool. It's nothing more than a tool to do what you want to do and accomplish what you want to get to. Now, it took me probably until law school to realize that learning is an active process. All the way through high school, college, I was able to pretty much make it up as I went along and not have to put any energy into it. When I got to law school, I realized, oh gosh, I really have to focus on how to learn and what to learn in order to get there. This is going to be the same way for folks. If you haven't done this before, if you're not familiar with these concepts, you have to want to learn how to do things. This is not an osmosis process. In my household growing up, there were some things that, and I've heard people talk, you know, if you want money, if you have money, you must have done something wrong to get there. It's not true. You have to have the self-confidence to want to go out and learn how to do it, how to get it and acquire it. And beat back the lack of self-confidence and self-doubt and understand, I use the term here, the universe, God, wants you to be able to succeed at what you do. And that includes, if you want, acquiring money or resources or assets. The basics of a budget, right? Income, money that comes in from whatever source that you have. Expenses, that which goes out to pay others. And savings, anything left after paying expenses. Now, some would say, in fact, from time to time, I'll quote Warren Buffett and Dave Ramsey and other folks who have talk about this stuff all the time. Warren Buffett would say, this is kind of backwards. You pay yourself first. You put your dollars into, you figure out how much you're gonna save. You put your money into savings first, and then you live on what's left. So here's kind of a standard breakdown of monthly expenses. Now, the more money you make, obviously, the easier it is to do this. But 70% of what your income is should go toward your living expenses. And I even give a breakdown there of different percentages that obviously guidelines. But generally speaking, you should keep your expenses within your needs within 70% of your income. And you, I once watched a YouTube video of a guy who did a presentation. He said, you know, as an engineer, I've worked my way through this process, and I thought, well, where am I spending most of my money? It's in my housing, my food, and my transportation. So he said, I lived in the cheapest rat trap apartment. He was an engineer being paid engineering wages, lived in the cheapest rat trap apartment I could find. My kitchen became the best restaurant in town. And I rode a bicycle to work all the time. Didn't live here in Minnesota, but he rode a bicycle all the time to work. And by the time he was, so he reduced those categories of expenses by 5 or 10%, and saved all of that money on top of his 10% that he was otherwise saving. He was able to retire at the age of 40. And if that's your goal, you have to figure out how to save money. You see a lot about saving money by skipping the cup of coffee at Starbucks and not eating out at lunchtime and all those kinds of things. That's all true. But that can be small amounts compared to reducing your living expenses, your needs significantly. You can save hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars in the course of a couple of months just by reducing some of these overhead expenses. You'll notice that I have giving as a want, because it's really not required from a financial perspective. Maybe from an emotional perspective, it's different. So one of the things that often comes up about managing money is, well, how do I've known people who, as soon as they have money in their pocket or in their checking account, it goes out to buy things. They spend, they spend a nickel like it's a quarter. And they outspend, and they get to the end of the month and they don't have anything left. If that's where you're starting at, one way to address that is to take your paycheck, convert it to cash, and have labeled envelopes with different categories of expenses. And then you put the money appropriately within the envelopes. And then if you have entertainment money, all you've got that month for entertainment is what's in that envelope. And then if you spend it all in the first week of the month, well, then that's all you got. So I think that's kind of an easy way to manage it from a cash perspective. The other way is to pay your bills online, which of course my kids do. They don't have auto pay, which is the other option, which we do. But they go online and they have their bank electronically transfer fund to pay their bills. It works really well if you have, it's like writing a check, except there's no piece of paper involved. One of the things that sometimes has a problem for folks is their bills are all arrived and it's inconsistent with how their cash arrives in their month. Most people who you pay on a regular basis, like banks and credit cards and such, you can arrange to have the payments come out at a certain time of month that match your cash flow. So it doesn't, they don't have to pay them all on the first of the month. You can pay them weekly or twice a month, or whatever the case may be. As you start to save, the first thing to put aside is $1,000. I call this the urgency fund. These are the dollars that are available if you get a flat tire. Then put that money, that money's there to pay that, so you don't have to use a credit card or some other form of loan to get a new tire. Once you have $1,000 saved, the next things to save is 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Those are the expenses that are there for a more long-term loss, such as losing a job, having to buy a whole new car. Bigger expenses that aren't necessarily something you can manage in your cash flow. And after you have $1,000, 6 months worth of expenses, that's when you can start investing. I next want to talk about debt, because this is what causes most people the most problems. You see, I have good debt in quotes. Well, is there any such thing as good debt? Dave Ramsey would say there is no such thing as good debt. You should never have debt. I'm not sure that's practical for most people. But think about debt as something you can use to buy something or obtain something that has value or will have value in the future. So the two I listed here are purchasing real estate, purchasing a home, and education. We'll talk more about those specifically later. Bad debt, or the worst debt. Credit card debt or payday loan debt, which is obscenely expensive from an interest rate perspective. But if you don't manage your budget correctly, then perhaps you have to use these instant debt expenses to try and manage your lifestyle. Auto debt. Autos are a horrible investment. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Consumer debt, that's store credit and other kinds of credit where you are often paying very high interest rates for things that will be of interest to you for 6 weeks, right? The new things that you buy for your house, things to keep up with the Joneses, really don't have much value often, and are a bad place to spend your money. The snowball debt payment system. I'm talking about this in the context of what Dave Ramsey would say, and he would say, if you have a lot of debt, if you're really trying to work out from underneath debt, start with your smallest debt first. Pay off that one right away. Get the confidence, do it right, feel good about yourself, and move on to the next one. One of the things I see a lot of young professionals do that gets them into trouble is they get into lifestyle creep. They decide, well, I'm making more money, I can have a nicer car. I can have a nicer house. My TV is not big enough. They're probably still staying within their budget, but they continue to spend more money on things when they really don't need it. And the result is, instead of saving 15% of their income, they're still stuck at the 10% save. Well, I'm still saving 10% of my income because that's what my budget says. Well, that's okay, but maybe you're not going to really acquire and be able to have a comfortable retirement process like you really want to. If you can avoid that lifestyle creep, once again, delayed gratification, you can acquire better later. Credit card debt. Unless you have good control of your budget and know exactly how much you can spend, and you have the discipline to not spend more than you have, credit cards are not useful. They're a horrible drain on your future income and assets. I remember talking to somebody who actually came to the United States from another country where they didn't have credit cards. They said, this feels like free money to me. I get free money, I can go buy whatever I want. So of course, they had thousands and thousands of dollars of credit card debt. And they have to be paid, period, paragraph, footnote. If you ever have to file for bankruptcy, credit card debt is an unsecured debt, and you can probably get out from underneath your credit card debt if that's what you have to do. But generally speaking, until you've reached the point where you're living within your budget, you're managing well, credit cards are not good. I don't have a slide for this, but there's a difference between a credit card and a debit card. A debit card, it draws directly from your checking account, and it's like writing a check. If you don't have any money in your checking account, and you try to use your debit card, it will be rejected. The credit card, of course, is something where you take an advance from a company. Then later, you have to pay it back. Now, if you are good at managing your money, you can use a credit card to your advantage. For example, Mary and I have a couple of credit cards, and we use them for almost all of our purchases. But we never purchase more than we can pay back at the end of the month. So what's the benefit of that? Well, I've gotten to use the credit card company's money for the term, I'll call it the float period, until the payment has to be made. So I've got an interest-free loan. Plus, I get bonus, we use cash back kinds of cards. We often make over $1,000 a year in dollars by using a credit card. So I get an interest-free loan and get paid $1,000 to use a credit card. That's because other people are doing so badly at this that I'm getting their interest payments. Auto debt. I'm always amazed at the number of people that I see out there driving brand new autos. It's maybe the worst investment in the world. The value of the car goes down so fast that oftentimes you'll see that in the next second bullet point, is that the people get what I'll refer to as upside down on their auto loan. The value of the car is lower than the amount that they owe for the purchase. And this came home to me when I was representing folks who have been in car accidents. They would total their car, they would get a payment from the insurance company for the value of their vehicle, the depreciated value of their vehicle, and it was less than the amount they owed to the car dealership. So they had to use the entire payment to give to the car dealership and still owed money. Now, the car dealership is quite glad to roll that note into a new vehicle. And they'll do the same thing again. So the key is to not take a note for the purchase of a car ever, if you can. Just drive a beater. I was a partner in a law firm in town, and I drove an old Ford Taurus that had over 100,000 miles on it. Wasn't I supposed to be one of those fancy guys who had a nice fancy car? And the answer is, I don't care. I don't care what other people think. I know that every month I'm not taking a car payment. I'm putting that money into a savings plan of some kind. So, my favorite is Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world. And he still drives a car that's at least 5 years old. And if he can, he buys one that has hail damage. He understands that they are just a horrible place to invest money. Retail therapy. Now, that usually ends up as a part of the credit card debt thing, but it could be in-store credit of one kind or another. When I was growing up as a young adult, credit cards were not as common as they are today. You could get credit cards for gas stations and things like that, but other Visa and MasterCard and American Express and all that were less common. Don't use retail therapy as a way to deal with stress. Go do something else. Eventually, if you run up your credit card debt, because it has to be paid unless you file for bankruptcy, you're going to run out of money and you're going to end up using dollars that you would otherwise spend on housing and other things to pay off your credit card debt. It's a lose-lose situation. Now I'm going to talk about something that's probably a kind of debt that can be used to increase the value of your financial estate. One of the things I tell folks is that the number of, as you might have saw from my slide, I worked as a trust officer and assistant vice president for Merchants Bank for a few years, and I sat next to the mortgage lender in our branch. And so I would have conversations about the lending business going, and she would say, Ray, there's so many different lending programs out there that if you want to live in a rural place, if you're a first-time home buyer, if you have military service, there's many, many different kinds of programs where you can get special deals. And every mortgage lender out there, even the ones in the bank had a base salary, but they basically made their money on almost like a commission. If you go to a mortgage lender who's not affiliated with the bank, they are almost 100% on commission. So if you're going to take out a mortgage, you want to obtain a mortgage, go to them and make them do their job. They want to make the loan to you more than you want to borrow money. And at the same time, one of the reasons I started thinking about helping people understand personal finance is that the mortgage lender that I was working with, and I worked with at the bank, she said, Ray, there's people who come in here who have no idea how to manage their money. They have no idea what their debt ratios are. They have no idea what the value of their estate is. When I say, I mean like zero idea. Most of you can probably come up with some idea of what the value of your estate is or how much you owe. And she said we would have to work with those folks, work through the process to try and help them find an idea of what they could afford. And that's the last bullet point. Pre-qualify. If you know you're going to buy real estate, go into the bank. They'll help you figure out what you can afford according to their ratios that they're allowed. And then you'll know how much house you can buy. And that will define for you and your realtor just where to look and how much to look for. Education debt. Holy smokes. I'm just realizing how much time I don't have. Education debt is important, but if you look at this from an investment perspective, if you're going to invest $100,000 into an education where you can't go out and get a job, that's not a very good investment financially. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't, but think about that. I'll use my daughter as an example. She went to Luther College and she got, her major was women's studies with an undergrad with associate minors in English and African American studies. And I thought, well, that's where the heavy items go on the bottom of the grocery bag, right? That's the kind of job you get with that kind of an education. Fortunately, she went on and got a graduate degree and now lives in Belfast, Ireland, and is doing fabulously, helping people apply for reparations for injuries received as part of the troubles there, and has a great life. But the point is, if you need to have a fine arts kind of education, you have to do extra work to make it economically pay. And there's some notes there about what to do. In your, the bottom note there, if you're starting out your career, find someone who is a great mentor. Learn. Once you learn, figure out what it is you're good at, your ikigai. You'll see that note there. That's not ikigai, that's not the guy who drives around the panel. An ikigai is a Japanese term for finding what you're good at, finding what people pay you for, and make that your career, basically. But once you've found your ikigai, you become an expert at your position, and then you start your own business. If you start your own business, after you've done that for a while, you either sell it or bring in younger people to take over your business. I see, like I said, we have 15 minutes left, and I have lots of slides left to go. But I guess at this point, I will open it up to questions. If people want to have questions about personal finance. If not, I will continue on with my presentation. Seeing none, away we go. Basic kinds of accounts, basic kinds of investment vehicles, checking accounts, savings accounts, money markets, and CDs, certificates of deposit, are bank instruments, places where you obtain dollars from a bank. Now you can buy CDs in some kind of in mutual funds, but basically they're issued by banks and other credit lenders, and basically the bank will take your dollars that you put into your checking account or savings account and lend them out to borrowers for business loans or personal loans or whatever the case may be, credit card loans. And then that's how those work. Stocks are different. You own a portion of a company. If you're an investor and own stocks, then you own a portion of a company. That means if the company does well, you do well. If the company does bad, you do bad. And bonds, on the other hand, are in effect, it's a kind of loan from the company or to the company in which they promise to pay you back your principal plus a stated amount of interest or by formula. And when you get those dollars in interest those are dollars. Those are real dollars. So for example, I have lots of money in the stock market. I watch my account go up, I watch my account go down. That's kind of funny money. That's not really dollars yet. It's an interest in the value of a business that goes up and down. Until I sell that stock, it's not money. It's just an interest in a business. Mutual funds. Mutual funds are a way to buy stocks or investments that are aggregated among hundreds, maybe even thousands of companies, so that you can diversify your risk. Life insurance is another form of investment. Some of them, whole life policies will have cash flow, or you can borrow money against the cash value of the policy. Brokerage account is a kind of place where you hold mutual funds and other kinds of instruments. You can also have certificates in your own name. I can tell you from an estate planning perspective, that's a horrible thing to do. Don't do that to your family. But open a brokerage account if you want to go that route. Then, of course, you can invest in other non-liquid assets like real estate or small businesses and things like that. The rule of 72 is something that everybody ought to be made aware of. If you have something that pays you interest, the interest rate return, let's say it's an 8% return. If you divide 72 by whatever that number is, that will tell you how many years it takes to double your money. So if you have something that returns 8% interest in 9 years, you'll have twice as much as you started with as a principal if you reinvest the interest. I like that quote by Albert Einstein. He considered, he's often made, he's got a lot of great quotes out there, but he considered compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. He who earns it, who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. And other concepts, asset allocation and, there are two things, if you have an investment portfolio, there are two things that really drive what happens according to your investment. It's your asset allocation, in other words, how much risk do you want to have versus how much return. So there's a direct proportional relationship between the amount of risk you take on an investment and the amount of return you get from the investment. It's not a perfect arrow, but generally speaking, it's almost a 45-degree angle. If, let's use an example, if you have something that's 100% bonds, for example, you're gonna have the lowest amount of risk, but you're also gonna have the lowest amount of returns. If you have something that's 100% stocks, you'll have the highest amount of return, but also the highest amount of risk. And what factor to come into that analysis is how much time do you have to let the dollars equalize out? When I was young, I had a very high percentage of stocks because if my investments went down, then I was just fine. Didn't bother me at all. I could wait to the next cycle and the stocks will go back up. Now that I'm over 65, I don't have as much time. I don't want as much risk. So I have a higher percentage of bonds and a lower percentage of stock. You'll see a lot of people out there in the world that will give you advice. Buy tech stock right now, the hot commodity, the hot stock are tech stocks. If you buy tech stocks, they'll go up and up and up. That's something called, in effect, timing the market. What they're saying is that if you buy tech stocks, you're putting all of your risk in one sector of the economy. And you'll do just fine. But I can remember in 2008, during the dot-com bubble burst, I had a company called Bluebeam that was great. It was going like crazy until it went bankrupt. If you want to invest in the market over the long term, you need a good asset allocation and stay there. Even Warren Buffett says that too. Buy something you understand and stay there. It's time in the market, the amount of time you have your dollars in the market, and not trying to time the purchase of a stock so that you buy it just before it goes up or while it's on its way up, that kind of thing. This is the giving part. If you manage your budget correctly and you have what you need, you can start to do things, once again, back to that purpose for money. Now the purpose for your money can be applied to what really matters in your life. Taking care of your family, taking care of your community, helping people out that need it. One of my favorite quotes by Winston Churchill. It said, my kids can probably recite from the top of their head. You make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And that's about how you work in your church, in other causes that are important to you. You manage your budget well, you have money there to give, and you make it work. Thank you. Any questions?
I'm a former educator. So the new legislation with the Social Security, where there's going to be a makeup for, I should be getting more money now with my Social Security. Are you familiar with that legislation?
I have not yet analyzed that legislation to be able to tell you how it will change in the context of your monthly income. Those who you're referring to, the one that says if you have a pension, you also still get Social Security.
Right, like when I retired, I paid into Social Security because I was an educator, but then I didn't get all of it because I had my retirement income.
That's right.
I played into my retirement, Social Security, there's this formula where you don't get the full amount.
You're gonna have to talk to a financial advisor. By the way, everything I've said here is not financial advice. It's not because I don't know your situation. I can't give you financial advice. And to repeat the question was, there recently has been legislation adopted that will change the way Social Security distributes, and wondering for someone who was an former educator, whether or not she would get more monthly income.
Yes, you should.
So, question, I keep seeing things about, because I'm trying to get my credit score higher. So I do have a credit card and I do pay it off at the end of the month, but is there, I keep seeing different formulas on when to actually pay, is it 3 days before the actual date, or is it, 14 days that I hope your credit score will be better, you know what I mean?
Right, I do know what you mean. When my son turned 18, I helped him apply for, actually 20. I helped him apply for a credit card because he had income that he could apply for. And in talking to the banker at the time, in order to create so if you know someone who doesn't have a credit score, I was talking to a doctor who came to the Mayo Clinic who was world renowned in Europe, or very renowned in Europe for his services, but had no credit score, 0. And he came to the Mayo Clinic, was earning a whole bunch of money, but he had no credit score. That can happen. And when I'm back to my son and his application for a credit card, they said, basically spend about $100 a month. And I didn't get an exact date from the guy, but the personal finance guy at the Merchants Bank said, pay it off every month. Whether it's 10 days or 14 days or however many days beforehand, you don't pay it off immediately, but pay it off when it comes due. And over the course of time, you'll develop a good credit score. That's one of the things that the credit and analyst companies look for. So I can't be more specific than pay off at the end of the month is what I've been told. That's a very good question. I meant to hit that point. Thank you. Other questions? Well, hearing none, it's now, oh, here's one over here.
One of the things I have noticed on financial advice is that it tends to be all over the map. And, the people who are the talking heads. One example is they used to talk about how much should you have in stocks, how much in bonds. And they would say, okay, take your age, subtract it from 100, and the number that's left is how much you should have in stocks, and then the rest of it should be in bonds, which means that you have a lot of bonds later on. On the other hand, Dave Ramsey has come out with a thing that says, oh, you should be taking, I think it was 8% out. And so another people has said, hey, you're doing this thing with not being 100% in stock, that's nuts. So I guess that I do question, how do you work these things out?
The question is, there's a lot of financial advice out there, everything from the amount of the ratio of stocks to bonds should be based on your age. The older you are and the more bonds you have. My friend Dave Ramsey, who talks about being able to take 8% out of your retirement account when you retire in order to, the standard rule of thumb was 4%, which started in the 60s. He said, that's crazy. They'll have way more money than you need. The answer is, Joel, it depends on your circumstances and your risk tolerance. The ones who would say that you should have the percentage of bonds based on your age is a fairly generic concept. I remember working in the trust department at the bank, and there was a guy in his 80s, and he was 100% in stock. Always had that. And he said, I'm riding the horse that got me here. And the answer is he didn't mind the swing. Now, if you're someone who has limited resources, then you should probably put a lot more money in bonds, because you can't afford the risk that the value of your investment will go down or go away. The amount appropriate for withdrawing for retirement purposes. Once again, that number is all over the place. Susie Ormond would say you should take 2%. You shouldn't retire till you have $5 million. Dave Ramsey, you're right, he has said 8%. You can take 8% if you're 100% invested in stocks, and what those folks will say, you buying certain kinds of index funds that smatter you across the investment spectrum. If you really want to fall asleep quickly, there was a doctoral thesis written in, I think it was the late 50s, early 60s, called out of the University of Chicago, called Modern Portfolio Theory. And basically the analysis of modern portfolio theory is that no one can pick what any stock will do at any one time. Some people get lucky now and again. And maybe you'll even have a string of luck. But the one thing we have that history tells us is that the market does go up overall. So if you have a great diversified portfolio across all kinds of sectors, across nations, all kinds of things, then you're gonna, what's the line? Rising tides raise all ships. Then you're going to ride that rise up. It's not, you're not gonna get rich quick, but it's a more certain outcome.
That was based on an average, so what they're talking about is you can't beat an average over time by picking stocks, just be careful. So in other words, if the average stocks are dropping, you're gonna be in the average stock crowd. If they're rising, you'll be rising, so when the boats are floating, you're gonna, that's the whole principle.
Right. Thanks, George.
Yeah, I guess one last comment on stocks is, you talk about you're invested in the company. The stock value actually is the perceived value of the company. And even worse than that, it's the perceived future value of the company. Because I have seen companies that are doing well declare a great dividend and had a great quarter and their stock dropped. It's because the investors now perceive they reached the top.
That's right.
And so
Harder than Tesla.
And
so my comment about stocks is it's perception. Stocks are perception.
stocks, the comment is that stocks are a perception, their value is based on perception of the asset value of the company and its assets going into the future. And while institutional investors have a great deal of influence on all of that, there's still a lot of money out there controlled by individuals as well. And institutional investors probably have a formula for what they do and how they analyze everything from dividends to price to earnings ratios and all kinds of things we don't have time to talk about here. But individuals are more of a seat of the pants, by the gut feeling about the company.
If you're gonna work on further presentations.
Yes,
I'd like to work on.
great.
I've thought about this many times, and it's all things you topic, but basically an hour on each of those topics, probably. And then also there's what to do by age, like when you're really young, middle age, really old, because they change it.
We will.
Anyway, let me know.
Thanks.
When you're over 90, everything changes. No, I'm serious about that, because the money comes in, well, what can you do with it? You don't wanna travel, you might fall off the boat. You don't wanna drive to the kids because you might have an accident on the way. Everything changes when you're over 90. And I live with people who are over 90, and I have no idea what they have, but everybody seems to be sort of just smiling.
George's comment, Bruce's comment is that basically as we get older, we end up finding out we've saved more than we needed.
That's right.
We didn't either spend it as fast as we should have because we had really good budgets and we stuck to them. Or the market has been kind to us and our investments have done well. And you reach, I refer to it as, there are different stages of retirement. There's I'll refer to them as the go-go's, the slow-go's, and the no-go's. When you're a go-go in retirement, then you should take, if you have the money, you might spend a little more than 4%. Because you have the ability to travel and do and see and participate and enjoy. As a slow go, now you're probably doing tour company activities and doing some other stuff. And you reach there's a whole part here about required minimum distributions and from retirement accounts and how they become exceptionally painful if you have saved too much and you didn't take it out over the course of your early retirement. Now you have to take it out, and that is all now treated as income if it's a traditional IRA. And the result is that you have to pay a lot of income tax on it. I'm now going through the process of converting traditional IRAs into Roth IRAs, which means that my interest rates are gonna be, I'm probably gonna pay north of 22% every year for the rest of my life. Because I didn't do this earlier. But I'm gonna avoid the point where I have to pay 32 or 38%.
Great. This is a broad philosophical question, but exactly in that tax place. When we think about a presentation like this, we're thinking very individualized, and I want to anchor back to what you said at the beginning, if not for Great Society programs, which are paid by income tax, which is broadly our collective deciding how we treat society. I want to talk, think about the intersection philosophically of our own personal well-being versus the well-being of those around us in our broader country, and there is a trade-off.
Yeah, the comment from Nick is that the more we focus on our, maybe rephrase it a bit.
I think there are individual actions and there is thinking about collective action.
Yes.
And because even something like credit cards, the personal benefit of credit card points are paid by others, by transaction fees, et cetera. If we all said no to credit cards, then perhaps there would be some great benefit, but it's that question. Climate change for another, there are individual things that we do, collective things we do, they're differing levels of agency.
The comment is that in the finance world, those who benefit at the expense of someone else. I think, may I summarize it that way?
That's it.
And the capitalist system, you're right.
That's right.
And the more purely capitalist it is, the worse it is.
I just want to say too, thinking about housing is an asset class as much as it is shelter. And there are differing incentives for an investment portfolio based on housing or real estate. It needs to go up for my own well-being. But it is effectively pricing people out of shelter.
Yeah.
And again, this is beyond this presentation, but I just want us to hold this in tension.
Right now is a perfect example in the housing market. All of us baby boomers who own real estate are watching the value of our real estate go crazy high, which means that people who need the 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom homes can't afford them. They can't get the loans. And once again, the benefit of one group is the loss of another. And that's the way our economic system is intentionally designed to work. So we have to, as a group, as a society, decide to moderate that with various kinds of benefits. And back to the loan programs, when I talked about with the mortgage broker, they try and, there are some programs out there that try and solve some of those problems by reducing the cost of the money you borrow to purchase a home. But is it enough? I don't know.
I asked the buyer of my home, do you intend to live in it or do you intend to flip it? And he said, I'll talk to my wife. And he said, no, we intend to live it. I said, fine, the sale goes through. Otherwise, I would have said no.
Yeah,
Because the flipping of houses these days is part of the capitalistic system.
flipping of houses. Perhaps we can turn off the recording. I don't know.
We can,
You wanna go off the record?
we can be.
Oh, I don't mind going off the record. This is a real problem.
We'll bring their presentation to a close.
We can close the presentation and if people want to stay and talk.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. Nothing to 12 o'clock.